Thank you so much, and what a morning it's been already, and I'm delighted to take a little bit of a walk down memory lane. And I want to set the stage a little bit because we're going to talk about social media and lessons learned, and then we're going to pivot and talk about AI. But to have a little context at the start, there was a time before social media where I was a young staffer in the US Congress, and the Congress was passing laws to address technology issues. And I remember distinctly in 1998, the Congress passed the Child Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA. And that was a law that was designed to constrain the ability of companies to collect information from kids 12 and under. It was meant at the time to be a down payment on a much larger omnibus privacy bill. Now, that law that I worked on as a staffer is 28 years ago, but it remains the last significant online protection legislation that the US Congress enacted 28 years ago. I was 12 myself at the time when I was working on it. But that is an indictment of the US Congress and its abdication of responsibility. These are American companies, and the US has a responsibility, primary responsibility to address the excesses of American companies, but it has essentially acted as an absentee landlord for the time since then. And the social media era then erupted, and I was present during part of that as the head of public policy at a company formerly known as Twitter, and left just before the current owner took over. But I think into the breach, into the absence of US leadership on technology policy since the 90s, effectively, across multiple administrations, into that breach has come the United Kingdom, Australia, the European Union, and to a certain extent, US states like California. And Jim mentioned earlier how California, because of its size and importance in the states, can also tend to move things along, but it's not a substitute for effective national legislation. So I want to talk first about the laws that other countries have put in place to deal with the excesses of the social media era, principally the Online Safety Act in the United Kingdom, and then also the Digital Services Act here in the European Union. And we'll go to you first, Melanie, because the Online Safety Act gives you, as the independent regulator, digital regulator in the United Kingdom, essentially 007 authority to go after bad faith actors in the online space, right, writ broadly. But why don't you talk a little bit and let people know what it was intended to do, how it's going, and how you see enforcement of that on the social media front.
Thank you very much, Colin, and thank you, guys. I'm so delighted to be here, and I'm wearing my Danish colours very deliberately today. So, yes, look, Ofcom, I'm the Chief Executive of Ofcom, and we are the UK's communications regulator. And the Online Safety Act in the UK was passed just over 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. It's very similar in many ways to the Digital Services Act. They are cousins. Neither of them give the regulator the power to take down individual bits of content. Instead, companies have a duty of care now to prevent anybody from accessing illegal material like illegal hate, terror, foreign interference information, child sexual abuse material, and so on, but also in our UK regime, wider protections for children, including taming algorithms and protections against grooming. So we've been up and running for a couple of years. The European Union was a little bit ahead of us in timing, and we had to do a load of detailed codes of practice, so we only started enforcement in April last year. But we now have 36 investigations open. It's not a competition. I think the Commission has 40. We watch those numbers. A little bit of competition is really helpful, by the way. So what have we learned? I mean, the first thing I would just say, I do think it's really important for anyone in a public policy position like mine to just go, why do we need to regulate? Do we need to regulate? You really do have to start there. And I am absolutely clear that the answer is yes, we do. And why is that? Because this industry cannot and will not get there on its own. And there is a culture in Silicon Valley, and there are some excellent people who are trying to do the right thing, but the culture, it has never been one that prioritizes safety. It prioritizes business growth, which means clicks, algorithms, connections, and so on. And it has not prioritized safety. And there has been a race to introduce new products, or else you'll get left behind, because the economies of scale to modern platforms, and it's the same in the AI world, mean that those who get there first get rewarded. And if you're not there quick enough, you'll never get the scale that allows you to really penetrate and keep the market. So speed, a lack of regard to safety, and also a complete lack of regard for understanding where the kids were. This, I think, is almost the most extraordinary thing, that this happened and nobody thought, is it okay for pornography to be available to children, just as it is to adults? Nobody really addressed that question. So we need it. Boy, do we need this. And as I say, interestingly, when I speak to the big social media platforms, and I go regularly to talk to them at different levels, interestingly, their strategy is they want to be in compliance with our laws and with the DSA. That's what they want. The question is, do they really get it and understand what that requires? And it is still very early days. But I want to give you a little bit of hope, okay? Regulation is not enough, and we need more laws, but I want to give you a little bit of hope. Here is why. So 2 and a bit years ago, Ofcom produced guidance on how the porn industry needed to introduce age checks. And we were met with a wave of disbelief that this was technologically possible, that it could preserve privacy, and that it would ever be adopted by the porn industry. 18 months later, by the end of July last year, we had 80% of visits to porn in the UK. I'm sorry to talk about porn such a lot. I never thought I'd be doing that when I took on this job 6 years ago, but there you go. We now have 80% of daily visits to porn sites in the United Kingdom covered by a highly effective age check. All of the top 10 big sites. We have a long tail. We have to enforce our way through that. We need to do that with international partners, including with the Commission and other members, and with the member states. But that is significant progress. And an awful lot of people haven't even noticed these checks because they're using information that's already on your phone. We have Apple have just introduced, a potentially groundbreaking change at the operating system level that allows individual apps to use information that they have about you already to tell the app your age in a way that a lot of the time the user isn't even going to see. And the innovation in the European Union and in Denmark with your app is all part of this picture as well. So age checks are there. They're being rolled out by industries no one ever thought would listen. It's not a job done yet. They are effective, and the technology is improving them all the time.
Thank you.
I'll better shut up and let you go on. But I have a bit of hope, I think, is what I'm about today.
Yeah, so I think it's nice to have a note of hope, and maybe we're going to endeavor to end on hope as well. But I want to get to Věra and talk a little bit about, sort of the companion or sibling legislation that exists in the European Union, the Digital Services Act. Talk a little bit about the genesis of that and sort of how it's going.
Yeah, you said cousin. Yeah, I would also say a sister.
Maybe a sister.
Because it's very similar. Maybe on the hope, I work for the Charles University. There is a new thing which I noticed. The students more and more opt for in-person meetings rather than digital communication. We have good data showing that They are hungry for real social contact. So this was my portion of hope. Well, in Europe, of course, we have a history of regulating. Some say it's not a nice thing to say that the European Union is just the queen of regulation, but we heard from Ursula that we take it also positively and that we want to invest in it, and there are very, very good things. And we also heard from Ursula that this commission is not hesitant to enforce the rules. This was good music to my ears, because when I saw and when I heard J.D. Vance and President Trump blackmailing European Union, that if you enforce your own legislation, democratically adopted legislation, we will increase tariffs. So I think that this is pure blackmailing. Coming back to the history, well, it was slow. Law is always slower than the money. This was obvious. I would disagree a little bit with the Prime Minister who said that democracies are lagging behind, because just look at it, who is quickest? Now Putin is very quick in prohibiting internet. Yeah, so we were slow, but we were real in the EU. And we were gradually reacting on evolving and threats which were becoming obvious. It was the threat to privacy, the threat to safety, then the need to do more on defense side. And now we are approaching the era of doing more on the basis of the health data. Yeah. So four stages. When we speak about privacy, how many times I received a lot of mentoring in the United States, in Washington, about how paranoid the Europeans are. That we, bloody hell, we want to have our privacy protected. Is it that
you were paranoid?
Strange, yes.
Yeah.
And I got upset.
Well, you're technically not paranoid if they are in fact after you.
Yeah. And I got upset one day and I said to some Republican congressman, look, we don't have only consumers in the EU, we have citizens.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the things, looking at both the Online Safety Act and the Digital Services Act, it was a recognition, perhaps belated, but a legislative reaction to business models that, particularly with respect to kids, were treating kids like little consumers rather than little citizens.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
There was one more thing. When I received GDPR to finalize the negotiations, I had to study a lot because it was not my main topic. When I came to the Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker did this fantastic joke to give me a portfolio I didn't know anything about. So I really had to study a lot. And the more I was studying what's happening to the people in the black box, the more I had a strange feeling it is reminding me of something. Yeah. And then I realized that it reminds me of my 25 years which I lived in communism. Because it was exactly the same feeling that we as citizens don't have any chance to understand or navigate what's happening with our identity. And I realized that you can come to a totalitarian regime not only by means of toxic ideologies, but also unstopped money.
Yeah. So let me do this.
It was very, and I will just complete safety. So we speak about the Digital Services Act and about the AI Act. Defense, we have to inevitably also speak about all the things in the cybersecurity field, but also European Media Freedom Act, because part of the effort to increase defense is the active fight against hybrid war and disinformation. Here comes the threat, especially to the Central and Eastern Europe, because Russia, of course, is a world champion in brainwashing. Yeah? Yep. And AI is only amplifying all the bad things which the digital era started.
Let's do this. Let's pivot a bit to AI, because we're able to take a little glance in the rearview mirror at the social media era and see that the laws were reactive to problems that were emergent in social media. We have an opportunity now, while AI is still relatively young, to begin to put in the safeguards and guardrails. And one of the ones you talk about is disinformation. The student panel earlier was talking about the fact that they wanted to make sure that if there was a social media delay until 16, that they didn't have their 16th birthday and get thrown in the deep end of the pool without ever learning how to navigate that. disinformation and knowing truth from fact and discerning how to navigate the online world. Talk about what you're seeing from the experience with the DSA and the Online Safety Act, what you would like to see concretely for the AI era so we can act anticipatorily, knowing what we can reasonably judge to be next steps in the industry.
Well, look, I think it's the same, and it's some new stuff. So I think the same principles, know where the kids are. Let's take age assurance properly seriously now. If something's new, don't test it on the public, frankly, but certainly don't test it on kids. Secondly, risk assessments, central to both the DSA and the OSA. We've already taken one company, Snapchat, right to the edge of compliance because their risk assessment said that they were green on everything, and we didn't agree. They changed it. We now move forward into the measures that they need to implement. But that discipline of doing the risk on safety is essential in a world of AI, because anyone who's been to California, it's a gold rush, an absolute gold rush. Every billboard in San Francisco is about AI. The money it's extraordinary. And so there has to be more friction up front before new products are tested. So for me, those principles, they were true. They should have happened before. They still need to happen.
Right.
Can I just add one more point? There's been a lot of talk this morning about social media and algorithms. And yes, I mean, I think that is an issue, and addiction is an issue. However, children out there online are also at serious risk of grooming and bullying. And that is not about social media and algorithms. It's about messaging. It's about gaming services. It's about making sure that you do not get recommended adults to join your friends when you're on Snap or Insta or TikTok. It's about making sure that adults can't find you. And next week, we are going to be announcing some changes we've secured from one of the big companies in that regard that will be, I hope, a serious protection for kids in the UK.
You want to break that news now or save it? Okay.
I've probably already said more than my enforcement team would really be happy with.
We're down to our final minute. I want to get from both of you what you would like to see in the AI space, taking the experience from social media, from those business models, and from the legislation of the OSA and the DSA. What would you like to see in AI early to constrain the excesses and the risks to youth?
Well, if I may, I think that by ChatGPT, AI reached for the driving license.
Okay.
Because before that, it was a child.
At what age can you drive?
We were, I don't know, 18.
Yeah.
But we were teaching a child. But suddenly we saw that it can live its own life and make own decisions. And I think that we tried to react on that in AI Act.
Yeah.
I remember the trialogue, 2 nights and 3 days I had to spend with Thierry Breton. And we had a dilemma whether to cover that by the AI Act or not. Because many said, including very influential states, that we cannot regulate something we don't know what it is.
Yeah.
But we, at the end, paranoid Europeans, we said, once we know what it is, it might be late. So on your question, what we should do now, I think that we should think about what Mr. Professor said. You said the sentence that AI should push us to realize what makes us human. And I would go extra mile. We should come back again to make a very strong social and maybe legislative agreement on what are things which the AI must not destroy. And it's the human dignity, it's the privacy, it's the freedom of speech, because we are protecting the freedom of speech of bots. Aren't we crazy? Copyright, and these basic things which make us human and which really need to keep.
I think we're at time at this point, but I think that message of making sure that the technology is animated by the human values that we bring to it, rather than the dictates of the corporate titans, I think is the message we want for AI. Last second.
Just add one thing. I completely agree with that. So look, if I have something that the platforms need to do, it's test in advance. I already mentioned that. They need to think like the perpetrators.
Testing.
testing, think like perpetrators, and don't launch a functionality like Grok did over Christmas in advance and then be surprised when everybody puts many of the women in this room in bikinis online. Don't be surprised by that. Plan it in advance. But my second point, which is absolutely where you are, is I would just say leadership everywhere. This needs communities, it needs schools, it needs everybody to be stopping us from becoming the worst versions of ourselves. We need to be owning that and naming it and talking about it face to face everywhere. In football clubs, in everywhere, in employment, because these technologies are very powerful. The public is going to love a lot of the services that are going to be produced. We have to accept that. But if we're going to use them effectively, we need to be talking now about how we stop becoming worse versions of ourselves, which is the risk.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you so much.